Saturday afternoon, my girlfriend told me she was too sick to see me. By 7:30 that night, I was standing in her backyard watching her drink beer with the ex-boyfriend she had buried 2 years before, and her brother Jake was working the grill like a man who already knew which side he had picked. That was the first thing. It was not the worst thing. I worked at my family's body shop on Spring Street until 3. I came home, ate the sandwich my mother left in the fridge, took a shower and changed into the clothes I always wore on Saturday nights with Michelle. Jeans, boots, a flannel I had owned since college. Nothing about me looked like the man I actually was, and I liked it that way. I had been seeing Michelle for 14 months. She thought I was a guy who fixed cars for a living. I had not corrected her, because for the first time in my life I was dating a woman who liked me, without knowing what was on my balance sheet, and I had decided to keep it that way until I knew what we were. 2 Saturdays before that one, she had fallen asleep on my chest after we cooked dinner. We had made pasta in my mother's kitchen because Michelle said her own apartment had bad lighting for cooking, and we had eaten standing up at the counter, and afterwards she had laid down on the couch and pulled my arm around her and asked me, half asleep, what I would name a daughter if we ever had one. I told her Eleanor, after my grandmother. She said that was a beautiful name. She fell asleep on the word beautiful. I did not move for an hour because I did not want to wake her up. I had been planning on a yellow notepad in my desk drawer at the office she did not know existed, the moment I would tell her the truth about my life. The notepad had a date written on the top of the page. The date was 3 weeks away. I was going to take her to the U.S. quarterfinal at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in a suite that was already reserved under my name, and I was going to tell her over dinner that the man she had been falling in love with also happened to be the man who owned the suite. That was the plan. That was the version of the future I had in my head when my phone buzzed at 4:47 on a Saturday afternoon and she told me she was sick. My phone buzzed at 4:47. It was her. She wanted to know if I was still home. I told her I was about to head over. Then a second message came in, longer, the kind of message you can tell has been rewritten before it was sent. She said she was not feeling great. She had body aches. She had taken something for it. She wanted to lie down. We could see each other tomorrow instead. I asked if it was the flu. She did not know. I asked if she wanted me to come and sit with her anyway. She said no, because the medicine was making her drowsy. Then she added one more line. Tomorrow, baby, I promise. I put the phone down on the counter, and something underneath my ribs would not settle. My mother was in the living room folding laundry with the World Cup pre-match show playing low on the television. The 2026 tournament was happening in our city. Atlanta was a host. The streets had been painted in flag colors for 2 months. Banners hung off every overpass on the way to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The bagel shop on the corner had renamed every sandwich after a country. The whole town smelled like beer and grilled meat and cardboard tickets, and you could not turn a corner in that city without seeing some piece of the World Cup looking back at you. That mattered. That mattered for reasons I did not understand yet. My mother glanced up at me from the laundry and asked why I was pacing. I told her Michelle was sick. She asked if Michelle was very sick or a little sick. I told her I did not know. She watched me for another second, then said something I would think about for a long time after. Go for a drive, son. Clear your head. If she said she is sick, then she is sick. I grabbed my keys. I told myself I was just going for the air. I lied. I drove the truck straight toward Michelle's neighborhood, and by 7:30, I was parked across the street from her house, and the first thing I saw was a red sedan with North Carolina plates pulled up to the curb in front of her gate. The second thing I saw was the music coming from the back of the house. Not the music of a sick woman trying to sleep. Loud music. People talking over it. Someone laughing. Through the open driver's window, I could hear the sustained rolling cheer of a soccer crowd through someone's outdoor speakers, the kind of cheer you only get when a stadium is full. I cut the engine and got out. I did not knock on the front door. I went the way I always went. Around the side gate I had helped Jake repair the previous summer, the gate where I knew which board creaked. When I came around the corner of the house, I saw the 4 of them under the covered patio. Jake at the grill with a beer, his friend Brian standing next to him. The TV mounted on the support beam was tuned to the US national team's group stage match against Costa Rica. Half-time, the score 0-0. And at the picnic table, with her hair pulled back and a cold beer in her hand, sitting one chair away from a man whose face I had not seen in 2.5 years, was Michelle. She was leaning toward him. She was laughing. He was Greg. Greg was the ex she had told me she had not seen, not spoken to, not thought about in 2.5 years. Greg, who had moved to North Carolina, who had a red sedan with North Carolina plates that was now parked 20 feet from her front door. She had told me she was sick. She had told me she was lying down. She had told me to come tomorrow. I stood at the edge of the patio for what felt like a long time. The longer I stood there, the smaller my world got. There was the grill. There was the screen with the soccer crowd. There was Michelle's shoulder, angled toward Greg's shoulder, and the way her body was already pretending to be his again. Jake glanced over and saw me first. His face went the color of cold ash. He said her name, quietly, just her name. Then he tilted his chin toward me. She turned. The smile was still on her face when her eyes met mine, and I watched it die in real time. She was up and moving toward me before I had taken a step, brushing past Greg without looking at him. Her voice was already pitched into the careful tone people use when they are cleaning something up. "Hey, Tony. I did not think you were coming over tonight." I did not answer. She started talking faster. She said she had been lying down. She said she had really been lying down. She said she had just gotten up. Greg only stopped by like an hour ago. Jake had invited him. She had only had one beer. "You said you were sick," I told her. "I am. I was. I just feel a little better. You have been feeling better enough to drink for an hour. Tony, please." That was the first sentence she said that I think might have been honest. Greg was watching us from the table. He had not stood up. He had not said hello. He had picked up his beer and was watching me over the rim of it with the half smile a man wears when he believes the chair he is sitting in already belongs to him. I asked Michelle, loud enough for the table to hear, why he was there. She said her brother had invited him. I asked her how long he was in town. She said she did not know. Greg answered for her. He said 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, that he was here for the World Cup. He had tickets to a few of the group matches and a quarterfinal at Mercedes-Benz. He said it the way men say expensive things when they want another man to hear the price. Then he turned to Michelle and added, "I told you, beautiful. I will get you in." That was the moment I knew it was not a barbecue. That was the moment I knew it was a takeover. I should have walked back to my truck right then. I did not. I walked over to the patio, shook Jake's hand, shook Brian's hand, and when Greg held out his hand, I looked at it for a half second too long before I shook it too. Jake offered me a beer. I took it because I needed something to do with my hands. Greg leaned back in his chair and asked me what I did for a living. I told him I worked at the body shop on Spring Street. He smiled. "A grease monkey," he said. "That is what I figured. Michelle showed me a picture of you a while back." He said the word grease the way a man places a thing he has bought on the table to see if another man will pick it up. I did not. I drank my beer. He was not done. He told the table he had almost not recognized the picture Michelle had shown him because in his line of work he was used to dealing with a different kind of crowd. He said, "No offense, brother. That is a good, honest job." He said the word honest the way a man uses a knife on butter. He said in his world, Saturday afternoons were spent at hospitality lounges, not under a hood, but it took all kinds. He told Michelle she was lucky she had finally met someone steady. He kept going. He told the table about his job. He said he was a director of hospitality operations for a company called Apex Premier. He said his territory covered 5 southeastern states. He said he had flown into Atlanta to coordinate VIP suite assignments for the World Cup. He said the names of the suites the way other men name vacations they have taken. The Trophy Lounge, the Founder's Box, the Captain's Suite at Bank of America Stadium up in Charlotte. He said all of those names like rooms he owned the keys to. Michelle was watching him while he talked. She was not watching him the way you watch an ex-boyfriend who has shown up uninvited. She was watching him the way you watch a man you have already started telling yourself is a better life. I drank. I smiled. I said almost nothing. When Brian asked Greg how he knew Michelle, Greg laughed and said, Old story, long story. Some stories do not really end, you know. He looked at Michelle when he said it, and Michelle looked back, and I felt my hand close around the bottle. I want to tell you something about that table. There was a piece of information at that table that nobody at that table had. It was a piece of information about me. It was a piece of information that, if Greg had known it that night, he would not have said the word Greece. He would have set his beer down very slowly and started backing toward his red sedan with the North Carolina plates. But he did not know. And I was not going to tell him, not yet. I stayed for another 20 minutes. I made small talk with Jake. I let Greg keep performing for an audience. When I finally said I was heading out, Michelle walked me to the gate, and at the gate she took my hand and looked at me like I was something fragile she did not want to break, and I almost laughed. Tony, I swear I did not plan this. Were you sick? I was. Were you in bed when I called you? She paused. That pause was an answer. It is not what you think. That sentence is the official anthem of every guilty person on earth. I told her to feel better. I kissed her on the cheek. I drove home. Somewhere on the way home, I made a decision I had not made yet. I decided not to fight him for her. I decided to let her choose. What I had not decided yet, what I would decide 3 days later, was what would happen to him after she did. Sunday, we met for lunch. She was already there when I got to the restaurant, her hands folded around a coffee like she was bracing for something. She apologized again. She said the night had been weird. She said she should have texted me when Greg showed up. She said she felt awful. I asked her if she still loved me. She paused. That pause cost her. She said she did. She said it the way people read a Bible verse aloud in a church they have not attended in years. The words came out in the right order, but the spirit had left the building. After lunch, I went to the body shop and worked on a 2018 Mustang for 4 hours without saying a word to anyone. My foreman Marcus walked into the bay around 6 and stood next to the car while I tightened a bolt I had already tightened. "You good, boss?" I told him I was fine. He told me I was lying. Marcus had been with me since the first job, before the body shop, before the bars, before any of the rest of it. Marcus had been the kid in high school who loaned me $400 for my dead grandmother's truck so I could get to my first real interview. I had paid him back the day I cashed my first paycheck. I had paid him back again with a stake in the company the day we closed on the first property. Marcus knew everything. Marcus knew because I had told him that I had been seeing a girl who had no idea what the rest of my life looked like, and that I had wanted to keep it that way for a while, because for once I was being chosen for the man in the flannel and not for the file behind him. Marcus asked me what was wrong. I told him. I told him about the texts. I told him about the patio. I told him about Greg. I told him about the words grease monkey and the way Greg had said them and the way Michelle had watched him while he said them. Marcus was very quiet for a long time. Then he asked me what company Greg had said he worked for. I told him, Apex Premier. Marcus laughed. It was not a happy laugh. He told me Apex Premier was a vendor we contracted with on the hospitality side. He told me Apex Premier handled a small piece of the suite logistics for 2 of our properties, and that the director of hospitality operations for their entire Southeastern division was a woman named Diane, who had been to my office twice in the previous month. There was no Greg, not at that level. Marcus pulled up the corporate directory on his phone, and we looked together. Greg's name was on the roster. His title was Hospitality Coordinator, Southeastern Region, mid-level. Office in Charlotte, not a director, not anywhere close to a director, the kind of guy who set up folding chairs and printed lanyards for a living. That was the first piece of information. The second piece came on Monday afternoon. Marcus, who is very good at his job and very protective of mine, called me from the office and asked me to sit down for what he was about to say. He told me Apex Premier had been flagged in our internal audit 2 weeks earlier for ticket discrepancies. He told me someone in their Charlotte office had been pulling premium World Cup tickets out of our allocation and reassigning them to private email addresses. He told me the pattern was small and clean and would have taken months to catch, except that one of our suite managers had noticed the same name signing for tickets at a checkpoint where that name had no business being. The name was Greg. I want you to understand something about that moment. I did not feel triumphant. I felt sick, because the woman I had been planning a future with was, at that exact second, somewhere on her phone, looking at a text from a man who was stealing tickets out of my own company so he could impress her. That was the first time I cried about it. It was also the last. By Monday night I was clear. I had two things in front of me. I had a girlfriend who had spent the weekend circling back toward a man she said meant nothing. And I had a fraud by name sitting at the same picnic table where I had sat, telling that same girlfriend that he could get her in using tickets that, in the strictest legal sense, belonged to me. I did not move. I waited. Wednesday. I drove to her house unannounced. She was on the porch when I pulled up, and the way her shoulders pulled in toward her chest told me everything I needed to know about how the next conversation was going to go. She did it on Thursday. She asked me to come over after work to talk. I knew what to talk meant. I drove there anyway. She was waiting for me at the gate. Her opening line was the kind of line people rehearse in a bathroom mirror. "Tony, I have made a decision, and before you say anything, I want you to know this has nothing to do with Greg." I did not say anything. I just looked at her. She kept going. "This is something I have been thinking about for a while. We have not been good. You have to feel that too. I want to end things, but I want to end them well. No fighting, no drama." I asked her one question. I asked her if she was lying about Greg. She said she was not. I asked her why she had changed her relationship status to single on her social media accounts at 6:42 that morning before she had said a single word to me. She blinked. I did not get an answer. I told her I hoped she would be happy. I told her, and I meant it, that I was sorry it had ended this way. I told her one more thing. I told her that whatever happened next, I would always be the man who came to her gate the night she lied. Then I drove home. That was Thursday. By Friday morning, she had blocked me on every platform. By Friday afternoon, my mother told me, when I came home for lunch, that one of the neighbors had seen Michelle's car pulling onto the interstate with 2 suitcases and a passenger side that was not empty. The passenger was a man. The man was driving a red sedan that was following her down the on-ramp. I knew where they were going. He had said it on the patio in front of all of us 1 week before. He had said he had tickets. He had said he was going to get her in. There was a US round of 16 match at the new stadium up in Charlotte that night, and he had a suite reservation he was not paying for. I did not sleep that Friday. I did not sleep on Saturday either. I scrolled her social media late Sunday afternoon, the way you scroll the obituaries of strangers when grief has nowhere else to go. And there she was. There they were. 6 photos. The 2 of them on the field at sunset before the gates opened. The 2 of them in sweet seats, his arm around her shoulders, both of them in matching team scarves I did not recognize. The caption under the photos was a single line. "Sometimes the long way around brings you back home." I read it twice. I closed the app. I sat on the edge of my bed for 10 minutes. Then I did the thing I should have done on Tuesday morning when Marcus first looked at me across the body shop floor. I picked up my phone and called him. I told him 3 words. "Pull the file." He did not ask which file. He knew. He told me he would have the audit report, the ticket trail, the email evidence, and Greg's full personnel record on my desk by 9 the next morning. And that if I wanted, he would have outside counsel on a conference line by 10. I told him I wanted both. Then I hung up. For the first time in 7 days, I slept. When I woke up Monday morning, I put on the same pair of jeans and the same work shirt I always wore, the ones with the small embroidered logo on the chest that nobody outside the company ever noticed, and I drove to the body shop. I parked in the back, like always. I went in through the service entrance, like always. But that morning, instead of going to the bay, I went up the stairs to the office on the 2nd floor. The office Greg, in his red sedan with his stolen suite tickets, did not know existed. The office where my name was on the door. The office on the 2nd floor was nothing like the body shop downstairs. The carpet was clean. The windows looked out over a parking lot that had 3 cars in it on a Monday morning, 2 of them mine. The 3rd was Marcus's. He was already there. He had brought coffee from the place on the corner and a stack of paper that was thicker than I had expected. I did not sit at the desk that morning. I sat at the small round table by the window, the one I used when I did not want a conversation to feel like a meeting. Marcus put the file in front of me. I want to walk you through what was in that file. Apex Premier was one of 17 vendors we used across our hospitality operations. My family had built that side of the business slowly, starting with one sports bar near Georgia Tech 22 years ago, the year my father had taken out a second mortgage on the house I grew up in. We had grown into 11 properties, 2 of them flagship locations with stadium suite contracts, one with a hospitality license that allowed us to run premium client experiences during major sporting events. The 2026 World Cup had been the largest single inflow of contracted business in our company's history. We had 3 suites at Mercedes-Benz Stadium under our name. We had a private rooftop viewing club in Buckhead that had been booked solid since March. Greg's name had crossed our internal audit twice in 8 days. The first time he had pulled 4 premium tickets to the U.S. Group stage match against Germany, out of a corporate allocation that had been earmarked for a real estate client, and he had reassigned them to a private email account that traced back to a friend of his in Charlotte. The friend had then resold 2 of those tickets on the secondary market and split the cash with Greg. The second time, he had used his Apex Premier credentials to walk a guest into a suite at Bank of America Stadium that had been reserved under our company's name, on a ticket that he had generated for himself by altering a manifest after the suite manager had logged off for the night. The guest, Marcus told me very quietly, was a woman named Michelle. I read the file 3 times. Then I called outside counsel. Outside counsel was a woman named Patricia, who had been my father's lawyer before she had been mine. She did not ask me how I was doing. She asked me what I wanted. I told her I wanted 3 things. I wanted Apex Premier's contract terminated. I wanted criminal charges filed for theft, fraud, and unauthorized use of a corporate license, and I wanted it done quietly enough that the man it was happening to would not see it coming. She told me I would have all 3 by Wednesday. She also told me something I had not asked for. She told me that the suite Greg had used at Bank of America Stadium for his Friday night with Michelle was, under federal sponsorship law, considered a corporate asset, and that anyone who had knowingly accepted access to that suite without proper credentialing could be named as a party in the civil filing. She did not have to spell out who that meant. She let it sit. I told her I did not want to name Michelle. I told her I wanted Greg. Patricia said, "All right," and she hung up. That was Monday afternoon. By Tuesday morning, our corporate security team had flagged Greg's credentials at every property, frozen his access at every venue, and pulled the key cards from every suite in his region. Greg did not know any of that yet. By Tuesday evening, our audit team had completed a parallel review of every transaction his name had touched in the past 6 months. The number was larger than I had expected. Greg, it turned out, had been doing this for a long time. The World Cup had only been the moment he had decided to scale. By Wednesday morning, Patricia had filed. She told me when she called that I should expect to receive a call from Apex Premier's general counsel by the end of the day, asking for a meeting. She told me the meeting should be at our office, not theirs. She told me I should not be in the room. She told me to stay in the body shop in the bay in my work clothes, with my hands in an engine where they belonged. She said the most powerful thing a man in my position could do was nothing. Let the file work, she said. Let the lawyers work. Let Greg find out who he had stolen from when he was sitting in a chair across from a stranger, reading the names of properties he had never heard of. I did what she said. I did not call Michelle. I did not text Michelle. I did not look at Michelle's social media for 4 full days. When I did finally look on Saturday night, 6 days after she and Greg had come back from Charlotte, the photos were still up. The captions were still up. There was a new one. It was a photo of her in a kitchen I did not recognize holding a coffee mug, with the caption, "I have never been this happy." I closed the app. I went to bed. The match the next day was the U.S. quarterfinal at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and our company was hosting 82 clients across 3 suites, and the rooftop in Buckhead was at full capacity. I worked the floor that day. I did not sit in any of the suites. I shook hands with people my father had introduced me to 20 years before. I checked on the kitchen at the rooftop venue. I made sure the runners had the bottle counts right. I poured a beer for a contractor I had not seen in 6 years. I did, in other words, the job I always did. in the clothes I always wore on the day my company brought in more revenue in a single afternoon than the body shop made in a year. While I was doing that, 212 miles north in Charlotte, our corporate security team and a federal agent were knocking on Greg's apartment door. Greg had moved Michelle in 5 days earlier. She answered the door. I want to say something here that I am not proud of. I want to say that there was a part of me, a small part, that was glad she was the one who answered the door. I want to say that there was a part of me that knew exactly how that moment would feel for her, and that part of me was not sorry. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I had loved her for 14 months. I had been planning her birthday in October. I had named a daughter for her on a couch in my mother's living room. She had walked out of my life and posted a photo with a man who had stolen tickets out of my own company to take her on a vacation. The federal agent identified himself. He asked her if Greg was home. He was not. I learned later, much later, where Greg actually was at that exact moment. He was standing in a will call line at Bank of America Stadium, 3 blocks from his apartment, holding a printed manifest he had altered the night before, wearing a lanyard he had pulled out of a supply closet, pretending he was supposed to be there. The suite manager who flagged him was a woman named Karen who had been with our company for 19 years. She did not say anything to him. She held his lanyard in one hand and his manifest in the other and called security on her radio. 2 of our corporate guys and a stadium police officer met him in the corridor behind the will call window. The whole thing took 11 minutes. He went into the corridor wearing a lanyard. He came out of the corridor without one. The lanyard went into an evidence bag. Greg went into the back of an unmarked car with his hands behind his back, on a sidewalk 100 feet from the gate where he had told Michelle the week before that he could get her in. He had 2 extra tickets in his pocket. He had been planning to bring 2 friends up from Atlanta that night to show off. Those friends, of course, did not know the tickets were stolen. They did not know anything about Greg when I really thought about it. Nobody who knew him knew him. The agent at Michelle's apartment door did not know any of that yet either. He told her that Greg was being detained in connection with an investigation into the unauthorized use of corporate credentials and the theft of premium event tickets totaling roughly $140,000 in resale value. He told her that the suite Greg had taken her to in Charlotte the week before was the property of a private hospitality company headquartered in Atlanta. He told her that the company had filed civil and criminal complaints. He told her that someone from corporate would be in touch with her in the coming days regarding her own statement. He gave her a card. He left. I learned all of this 2 hours later, while I was wiping down a bar in Buckhead, when Patricia called me on my cell phone and said it is done. I did not say anything for a second. She asked me if I was all right. I told her I was. She said, "There is one more thing." She said, "The company that filed the complaint, the corporate name on the paperwork that was handed to Greg this afternoon, and that will be handed to Michelle on Tuesday morning, is not the doing business as name they would recognize from one of our consumer venues. It is the legal parent name. The holding company name, the name that has my name in it, because my father had put it on the door the year I was born." She said, "Your name is on the lawsuit." She said, "When she sees the documents, she will see your name." I had not thought about that. I should have thought about that. I had been so careful for 14 months not to be the man on the documents. Now I was the man on the documents. I told Patricia that was fine. I hung up the phone. I went back to wiping the bar. The third thing I want to tell you is what happened on Tuesday. I was at the body shop. It was just after 11. I had a Camaro on a lift and a foot of grease running up my forearm and a pair of glasses pushed up onto my head, and I was telling one of the new techs how to seat a flywheel without scoring the bell housing when my mother called. She did not say hello. She said, "Son." She said, "There is a girl on the porch. I told her I would be home in an hour." She said, "I think you should come now." I rinsed my hands. I changed into a clean shirt. I drove home. Michelle was sitting on the steps of my mother's house in a sundress I had never seen before, with a manila folder in her lap and her sunglasses pushed up onto her head. The manila folder, I would learn 10 minutes later, was a copy of the civil complaint. She had driven down from Charlotte that morning. She had not called. She had not texted. She had simply gotten in a car at 5 in the morning and driven 5 hours to my mother's front porch. I sat down next to her on the step. I did not say anything. She did not look at me. She opened the folder. She read out loud very softly the legal name at the top of the page. She said, "This is your name." I said, "Yes." She said, "You own all of it." I said, "Yes." She said, "The suites, the bars, the contracts." I said, "Yes." She said, "When he told you he was a director of hospitality operations." I said, "Yes." She said, "The grease monkey." I said, "Yes." She started crying. I want you to understand that I did not say anything for a long time. I did not gloat. I did not push. I did not in that moment take the pleasure I had thought I would take. I sat on the step next to her, and I let her cry, and I waited for her to say what she had driven 5 hours to say. She finally said it. She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" That was the wrong question. I told her so. I told her, very quietly, that the right question was not why I had not told her. The right question was why, the moment a man with a stolen company badge had sat at her brother's table and called me a grease monkey, she had laughed instead of defending me. The right question was why she had texted me that she was sick when she had been waiting at her gate for him. The right question was why she had taken a vacation to Charlotte on the credit card of a stranger, knowing it was a stranger, knowing she was lying about who he was. I told her the answer to all of those questions was the same answer. I told her she had been ready to leave me before he had walked through the gate. I told her he had only been the door. She did not argue with me. She did not have anything left to argue with. She asked me what was going to happen to her. I told her that the corporate filing was against Greg, not against her, but that she would receive a letter on Tuesday from our outside counsel asking her to provide a written statement about the dates of her stay in the suite at Bank of America Stadium, and that if she gave that statement honestly, she would not be named as a party. She asked me what was going to happen to Greg. I told her that was not my problem anymore. She asked me, and this was the question I had been waiting for and had not known I had been waiting for. She asked me if there was any version of this where she came home. I looked at her. I told her no. I told her there was no version of this where she came home. I told her very gently that the day she had texted me that she was sick was the day I had stopped being the man who would have taken her back. I told her I had spent 14 months learning to be the man in the flannel she had loved, and that I had been ready, on a yellow notepad in a desk drawer, to be both men for her, and that she had decided, on a patio in front of a man with a stolen badge, that the man in the flannel was not enough. I told her I had no anger left for her. I told her that what she had done to me had been done. I told her that I wished her well sincerely, and that I hoped she would build a life that did not require lying to anyone. I told her one more thing. I told her that the thing she would have to live with for the rest of her life was not that she had left me for the wrong man. It was that she had left me before she had ever known who I was. She did not say anything to that. She got up. She put the manila folder under her arm. She walked down the steps and got into her car and drove away, and I sat on the porch for a long time after she was gone. My mother came out and sat down next to me. She did not ask me what we had said. She put her hand on top of mine and left it there. I want to tell you about one more day. The US national team made it to the semi-final. The match was at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on a Tuesday night in mid-July. Our company hosted 94 clients across 3 suites and the rooftop venue. The captain's suite was reserved under my name. I sat in it for the first time that summer. I had a friend with me, a man named Marcus, and his wife, and his 2 daughters, who called me Uncle Tony, and a small group of clients who had been with our company since the year my father had opened the first bar. Greg was at that moment 2 states away, awaiting arraignment on 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of unauthorized use of corporate credentials. He had lost his job, his apartment, his car, and what was left of his story. The civil suit, Patricia told me, would settle in our favor in roughly 4 months, by which point Greg would owe my company more money than he had ever earned in his life. Michelle had moved out of his apartment within a week of my mother's porch. She had not posted on social media in 2 months. I learned through Jake that she was living with her aunt in Savannah and working at a bakery near the river. I had not contacted her. She had not contacted me. Jake, her brother, called me on a Wednesday 3 weeks after the porch. He did not say hello. He said, "Tony, I owe you an apology." I waited. He said, I knew that Saturday. I knew when he showed up at the gate and asked if he could come in. I knew when my sister said yes. I knew when she texted me at 3:30 in the afternoon and said, "Can we do this at your mother's house? Because I do not want Tony to come over." I knew she had told you she was sick. I knew that was a lie because she had told me in the same breath that she had told you she was sick. I let her do it. I poured the beer. I lit the grill. I let the man with the stolen lanyard sit at my table. He said, "I am sorry, brother." I told him I appreciated it. I told him, and I meant it, that the only thing he could do going forward was decide who he was going to be the next time a man like Greg walked through one of his gates. I told him I had no anger left for him either, but that I would not be coming to any more cookouts. I told him my mother still loved his mother, and that I hoped that part of it would not have to break. He said he hoped so too. We have not spoken much since. That is fine. Some apologies do not require a friendship at the end of them. I had not loved her any less. That is the part that no one tells you. The justice does not erase the love. It only puts the love in a room where it cannot reach you anymore. In the suite at Mercedes-Benz Stadium that Tuesday night in July, the US went down a goal in the 18th minute and tied it back up in stoppage time of the first half. The crowd of 70,000 people stood for the entire second half. I stood with them. When the US scored the winning goal in the 87th minute, Marcus turned to me and put both hands on my shoulders and said, "Your dad would be losing his mind right now," and he laughed, and I laughed, and it was the first time I had laughed in 2 months. After the match, when the suite was clearing out, one of the runners came up to me with a question on her face. She asked me if I had ordered the second bar setup or if it had been the suite to our left. I told her I had ordered it. She thanked me and she paused and she said, "I have to tell you, sir, when I started here this summer, I did not know who you were." I asked her what she meant. She said, "The guys in the kitchen told me on my first day that the man in the flannel walking around the floor with the bottle count was not a runner. They said he was the boss. They said he had been doing the bottle count for 20 years because he liked it. They said his name was on the building." She said, "I just wanted you to know I figured it out." I told her thank you. I told her I appreciated it. I told her, and I meant it, that the man in the flannel doing the bottle count was who I had always been, no matter whose name was on the building. I went home that night. My mother was already asleep. I sat on the porch with a beer and looked at the yard for a long time. I thought about Eleanor. I thought about a yellow notepad in a desk drawer with a date that had passed. I thought about a Saturday afternoon in early summer, when a phone had buzzed at 4:47, and a woman I loved had told me she was sick. I thought about a man I had married off to a federal indictment without ever raising my voice. And I thought, finally, about the only sentence that had stayed with me through all of it. The sentence had been said by a stranger in a stolen chair at a barbecue I had not been invited to. The sentence had been 3 words: a grease monkey. I sat on the porch in the dark in my flannel. In the city my family had built one bar at a time, with my name on a stadium suite I had not used until that summer, and I lifted the beer to my mouth, and I smiled. Yes, I thought, a grease monkey. That is exactly what I was. That was always exactly what I was, and it had been more than enough. What would you do in this situation? Be honest, or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.